guest on Special Times with Peter Filosa is Richard DeSorgher. Richard was born and raised in Medfield. He taught history and political science for 35 years in Medfield schools before retiring in 2011. Richard is also town historian and has written several books and many articles on the history of Medfield. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you for being. Nice to see you, Peter.
You too. Since you retired, you no longer live and work in Medfield. What are you doing now, and where do you live?
Well, we actually retired down to the Cape, the town of Mashpee, and when I got down there, again, my interest being in history, I was appointed to the Historical Commission down in Mashpee as well. And Mashpee's history is just very unique in the sense it's tied to the Wampanoags down there. So I've been learning a lot of the history down there. And one very kind of strange thing, once I got appointed to the Historical Commission, we were doing some research, and I said to one of the other members, where's the annual town report? Every year a town puts out an annual town report. And so they said, well, we're missing. Mashpee doesn't become a town until 1870. So they said they were missing all the town reports up to 1910. And they said, I said, what do you mean you're missing them? Well, no one has them. They don't know where they are. And I said, well, wait a minute. I know, because doing research here in Medfield, that every town also submits the annual town report into the State House. So I called up the State House, and they said, yep, we have them, but they're in very fragile condition. You can't Xerox or copy them. But if you come in with your iPhone, you can line up. Well, there were 890-something pages.
Wow.
So it was going to take me almost all day lining them up. Now, the name DeSorgher is unique in the sense we were always told, it's Belgian in origin, and we were always told that we were the only DeSorghers in the United States. Because it's funny, because we have the DE and then that capital S that's in there. So when I went to the records, I was there in the State House Library, and I'm taking the pictures, and I'm not reading, but I'm lining them up to make sure it fits. And I look and I see this DE capital S. And I look down and I saw the name, this Mary Lee DeSorgher, who's my great-grandmother. And I yelled out, what? Because I'm in a quiet library and everybody's looking saying...
I've been to that library at the State House when I went for the State House tour.
Okay, well that's where I was.
With Rob.
That's where I was. So I let out a yell and I said, wait a minute. In the Mashpee Town report, this Mary Lee DeSorgher was teaching. She was listed as being paid 1887, 1888, 1889 to 1890. Well, we never knew, our family never knew that. We knew, just real quick, my great-grandfather, age 19, was an assistant apprentice ship's carpenter. And they came into Boston and he jumped ship. He just stayed here. And he eventually married this Mary, last name Lee, of Connecticut, and they had one child, my grandfather. And what happened, well, he was a carpenter. He built a lot of the three-deckers that are in Boston. And what happened is he earned enough money, he wanted to bring his mother over from Belgium. So he brought the mother over, but the mother and the wife, Mary Lee, didn't get along. And she said to him, either the mother goes or I go. And he says, I can't send my mother back. So she takes my 8-year-old grandfather, says, see you later, and they left. Well, she was a teacher. We always thought she went to Franklin, where she taught in that one-room schoolhouse in Franklin. We didn't know, and my father didn't know, that she actually went down to Mashpee, and she was down there 3 years in Mashpee teaching. Why, we never knew. And not only that, but my 8-year-old grandfather would have been one of the only Caucasians going to school with Wampanoag kids. Why didn't she ever mention that? Why didn't my grandfather, ever say to my father, hey, when I was a kid, I was down the Cape. So it's a mystery. My father, unfortunately, has passed away, so we can't ask him. My mother never knew any of that, so it's just so strange. So I ended up living in Mashpee and finding out that back in the 1800s, my grandmother and grandfather, great-grandmother and grandfather lived in that same town. So of course my wife says, ooh, the spirits brought me to Mashpee. But so there's a strange story. We never knew of our family history that she actually, and then in 1890 she ended up going to Franklin where she did teach. And here's the conclusion of that story, which is very strange. In 1900, the mother, my great-grandfather's mother, dies, and Mary Lee comes back, knocks on the door, I'm back, and moved in. They lived happily ever after, celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary together. So a very strange story that ties into, and Mashpee, when as a kid, we used to go down the Cape, but it was always like Hyannis, Yarmouth, Dennis, that area. We never went. I don't know if I had even ever been in Mashpee before in my life.
Talk about the Cape. I've thrown out ceremonial first pitches for all the Cape Cod League teams.
Oh, we go to the Katua Kettleair games.
I've done all the teams down there, and it was truly pretty cool to play going onto the field like with the Martha's Vineyard Sharks and all the teams, and have them help me warm up to throw out the first pitch. And
yeah, that's
pretty cool.
Some of the best baseball is out of the Cape Cod League. A number of Red Sox and Major League players were in that Cape Cod League. We love going. We just bring our folding chairs, sit out there. We bring our supper, eat, watch. It's just a fun thing.
Yeah, I've done that so many summers. It's pretty cool.
So that's my strange story tied into Mashpee. So that's where I am. I'm working with the Historical Commission there. I got involved with helping to build a war memorial for the veterans down there. I was involved in the one here in Medfield at Baxter Park, and we're doing a very similar thing down there in Mashpee. So I am still involved with the history there. Me and my dad should come visit you sometime. I'd love to. We'd love to give you a tour around. I'll show you. The other thing that I do, we have a one-room schoolhouse. It's called the 1831 one-room schoolhouse, and I play the part as the schoolmaster. So we tour all the third grade classes there. It's open during the summer. We tour people through. So I'd love to give you a tour of that too.
It'd be cool. I'd like that. Do you come back often to visit Medfield? I do. My sister is still here, so we have family events that are here. Medfield TV actually had me back just about a year ago, and I did a program on the King Philip War. And then the Montrose School had me come in and do a whole program on hat making and the hat factory in Medfield, because where the Montrose School is now was the old hat factory. And that hat factory was the second largest straw and felt hat factory in the country that was here. So I was back for a program, and just the other night for the Belforge Art Center, I did a program on Medfield State Hospital, so I was back for that as well. Sounds cool. It was a nice group. I went to a Shakespeare play over the summer there at the Belforge. Yeah, I mean, that chapel, what a beautiful job. This Gene Mineo and the group up there have done a tremendous job. And I don't know if you've seen the plans, but when that's finished, because they combine the old infirmary with the chapel, you're going to have a beautiful cultural center that's up there. That's a small town of Medfield, to have something like that, yeah, it would be unbelievable. Are you writing any books or working on any historical projects at this time?
Well, I've put out a couple of books under the This Old Town. So I just finished that, my last one last year. What I started, and it's been on the back burner for a while, but the hardcover book I did updated where William Tilden ended, which was the main history of Medfield that went up to 1886. So I took from where he left off up until 1925. And so over the past several years, I've been doing notes and doing some research to take Medfield's history from 1926 to 1955, to take that next. So I need to get going a little bit. There's been a lot of other things going on that have sidetracked me, but I do have a lot of notes on that. So eventually, I'd like to get that published, but I have to move quickly because people that can remember things out of the 30s, 40s, 50s are getting along in years, so I have to move quickly on that.
Well, that sounds cool.
Thanks.
What are the most important historical events that have had an effect on Medfield?
Oh, good question. Well, I think right off the bat, I would have to say the attack on Medfield during the King Philip War. Half the town is burned. Some 17 residents, excuse me, are killed. Unknown number of Native Americans were killed. The town was so set back, it took years and years to recover. You got to remember, back then there was no homeowners insurance and things like that. So if you lost your house, your farm, you're out. You had to find somewhere to go, stay with friends or family or people in a nearby town. So that clearly would be probably the biggest event that impacted Medfield. And that took, as I said, years to recover. A second one, I mean, there would be many. The impact of like the American Revolution, Civil War, but I would say the next best would probably be the impact of immigrants and non-town people coming into Medfield. So for example, you had in the mid and late 1800s, as large number of Irish poured into, especially Boston places, because Boston was one of the closest ports. You had a lot of those Irish trickle also into Medfield. And then in the 1920s, you had a large number of Italians that came into Medfield. Many settled on Frury Street into Medfield. And unfortunately, they met a lot of prejudice against them. It was very difficult for a lot of them. I'll try to give you some examples. For example, Medfield and upstairs in Town Hall used to be a big hall that was there. It was called Chenery Hall. And they used to have town-wide dances and things that were there. Well, because of the large number of Irish and Italians that were coming to Medfield, which used to be open to everybody, they changed it to invitation only so that they could exclude the Irish and the Italians. And there was an unwritten rule here in Medfield: you did not sell property to Catholics, Medfield was predominantly a Protestant community, and of course the Irish and Italians tended to be more Catholic. And so the only way Irish or Italians sometimes could buy property is what they call a straw man. In other words, they would find someone who was not an Irish or Italian Catholic, and they would make a deal: you buy the property and then sell it to me. And that's how a lot of Irish and Italians were able to get property in Medfield, because it was, as I said, an unwritten rule you didn't. And one other story, you had the Vassaturo family that moved into what was the new Miller Street, and you had the Ku Klux Klan was operating here in Massachusetts, and they didn't like the idea that this Italian Catholic Vassaturo family moved into Miller Street, and they had a petition telling them to get out. And they refused, and one morning they woke up and there was a burning cross on their lawn threatening them. And what's interesting, Joe Roberts, as the funeral home, who started the funeral home that is now Mitchell Caruso Funeral Home, he was a Protestant. He took that petition and he ripped it up and said, you know, they're staying. So there was a lot of prejudice with that. And the other wave that had an impact would be right after World War II, when the first housing development in Medfield was built. And that's the area where Summer Street, Pine Street, Lower Mason Road, Remsen Ave, Johns Ave, that area, they built the first real houses in Medfield, a development after World War II. And you had a lot of people from Boston, the surrounding areas, that moved in. And many of them were able to do that because of what was called the GI Bill that Roosevelt had started, where they helped a lot of the veterans to be able to go to college and buy homes. And a lot of the Medfield people that lived here didn't like that. In fact, the houses they called matchbox houses, because they were the small capes and ranches at the time. And my folks were one of the first that moved into 23 Summer Street in that new development that was there. So there was a lot of them, and the families had a lot of kids. When I grew up over onto Johns Avenue, there was a family of 11 kids, a family of 10 kids, and a family of 7 in 3 houses. So growing up, we had tons of friends around to play pickup, football or games or whatever. There was just tons of kids everywhere. And that had a huge impact on Medfield, because suddenly you had to build new schools. And suddenly in the 50s you had the Memorial School built. In addition to the Memorial School, you had an addition to the Dale Street School, you had the new, what we call the new high school, which is now the Blake Middle School, was built, all within a 10-year period. Because suddenly all these, and that changed the town a great deal. So I think that probably was the second biggest impact.
Talk about World War II. My dad's father was in World War II in Japan.
What branch of service he was in? Army, Navy?
Army.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you didn't know that.
I did not. My father was in World War. He was in the Merchant Marines, and he was on Liberty ships, and he was everywhere from the South Pacific to the North Atlantic to the Mediterranean. And that was very hectic, because the German U-boats were sending missiles because they wanted to sink those ships so they couldn't get the supplies to the troops.
So when my dad's father passed, I was chosen to give at the military away for his memorial service. I was picked to give his eulogy in front of my family.
Oh,
so
what a nice honor.
It was
nice.
pretty cool. I was happy to be chosen, so it was nice.
Yeah, that's a nice honor.
Is there any younger person or with the same passion for Medfield history who will continue the legacy of you and William
Tilden?
Tilden?
Interesting question. When I taught at Medfield, I started at the middle school and then at the high school. When we would cover a certain part of history, I would always try to bring in what was going on locally here in Medfield, with the hopes that it would, because if kids can relate to something that they know about, they tend to get more interested in it. And so, for example, when we talked about the King Philip War, we did the King Philip War, I started this bike trip. And I had all the 8th graders. We actually rode out to all the different sites in Medfield where the different events happened during the King Philip War. And some of them were right near the kids' house, and that would get them kind of excited. And I also started a research project where I used, you mentioned William Tilden, Tilden's history is great. It has a genealogy that's tremendous of all these early Medfield families. So what I would do, I would give each kid just the name of someone that lived in Medfield. And I would tell them, you're going to have to create that whole person's life. I want to know when they were born, where they lived, what they did for work, what religion they were, what children. I want to know everything about them. And all I told them was just the person's name. So they had to use Tilden's history. We opened up the Historical Society. The kids used to go down there Saturdays, do their research. They went out into the community, and they learned a lot of research skills, and it got them knowledgeable about their own hometown, here in Medfield as well. And then one other thing, a lot of the attack on Medfield took place along the Charles River. And so the next step, we were able to actually put the kids in canoes and take the kids, I believe they still do that, take them down the river. So by trying to do a lot of events like that, it gets the kids out. Kids learn when they do something, not just read about it. And so by getting them out into the community, I think they would get excited about things. And I would hope that would spur them to carry on their interest in history. The thing that's hard is Medfield's a very expensive place for young people to move into because the cost of houses here are so much. A kid just starting out, newly married, it's very difficult. So a lot of those students are not in Medfield, but I've noticed once they do get married and do get jobs, they try to come back to Medfield. And there's a number of my former students that now live here in Medfield. And it's funny because when they're in high school, they used to call Medfield Deadfield. Nothing to do here, and they wanted to get out. But once they get married and have kids, they say, hey, this was a pretty good place to grow up into. Good schools, good environment, safe place to live. And so now they want to come back and live in the Medfield. So to answer your question of, there's one particular student, I hope I'm not embarrassing him, Kevin Holbrook is his name. And Kevin was a great history student, and he continues teaching history with into Boston College even. And he now has been appointed as one of the trustees of the Dwight Derby House.
Oh.
And now he's living over in Walpole. I think he wants to get back into Medfield. But he has a great interest in history. And he did some research and found that his Holbrook family is actually related to one of the Holbrooks, who were one of the early settlers here in Medfield. So I'm hoping he has a lot of interest. He actually lives right in Walpole, but right almost on the Medfield line. So I keep telling him we need to get the selectmen to move the boundary so that we can get him back into Medfield.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, talk about the Medfield, where the canoes are.
The Charles River?
I was friends with a guy that used to own the restaurant where the
Charles
canoes
Cafe?
were.
Oh, yeah.
The guy, his name was Steve.
Steve Cook. Yeah.
I was friends with him, and every time I would go in there for dinner, he would always welcome me with open arms.
Sure.
And he was a great guy, and I was sad to learn that he passed recently.
Yeah.
He was a wonderful man.
He really was, and he did a great job. I mean, that building has a lot of history, actually, and it is not open since then. That's been closed for a long time now, which is too bad. I would think someone, it's right on 109, you would think that would be a good spot. But
But he was a good guy.
he was very good. I knew Steve. He was just a year ahead of me, school-wise.
My parents and I moved to Medfield in 1984 in our house in Pineal Park, close to the DeSorgher home on Summer Street. Is there any interest in history to Pineal Park?
Pineal Park, I think, is one of the of all the developments in Medfield, it was one of the best developments because, first of all, its location, and they have sidewalks that you can walk to town, you can walk to school. But plus, when they built Pine Needle Park, they left a lot of the woods that were there. Like some developments come in and they just level everything. But Pine Needle Park, I think, did a nice job leaving a lot of the trees and environment that was in there. But when I grew up, that was all woods, because I lived right there on Summer Street, and Green Street turned dirt at Summer Street, and then it was dirt that went up there. And so we used to go up into the woods there, and in fact, we used to be able to cut through to go to Rocky Woods. Now, anyone that's lived in Medfield after 1980 probably doesn't realize what tremendous recreation area Rocky Woods used to be. There was the pond there that they used to have skating in the winter. More than just skating, there was the clubhouse up above. They would plow, they would water down the ice. It was nice and smooth. They had lights there. They would play music. You could skate at night. And if it got cold, you go into the cabin that was there, and they had a huge fireplace at the end with huge. So you'd sit on the bench, you'd get warm. You could get a hot dog, a hot chocolate, go back out skating. They had 2 hockey ponds that were out there. You'd be able to play hockey there. As a kid in high school, I worked up there for a couple of summers, and you had, out in the pond, you had the paddle boats and rowboats you could rent and take out. There was a tower. You could hike up to the fire tower, and you could see the skyline of Boston. You could see the mountains out towards central Massachusetts. You could walk the trails. They had, actually, in the winter, you won't believe this, but they had downhill skiing. They had a rope tow, and it would end near the pond. So what they had to do so that people wouldn't go into the pond, they had these bales of hay and stuff they would put there. But if you went too far, you would end up into the pond. But there was actually a rope tow, and you could also go cross-country skiing there. They had picnic. It just was a beautiful recreation area. So as kids, we could hike up through what is now Pine Needle Park, and you could take the trails and go into Rocky Woods, and you could beat I think they charged us 50 cents. You could beat paying to get in there. As kids, you could get in there for free. And then when they started building Pine Needle Park, I can remember where Emerson Road comes into Flintlock, there was a huge sand pit as they began to dig. And as kids, we'd get up the top and you'd jump and roll down into the sand pits there. So Rocky Woods and Pine Needle Park was all just woods and trails that were up there. So it had a history of woods.
Is there any history about people with developmental disabilities in Medfield?
Interesting question again. You know what I think? I think in a lot of earlier history, a lot of disabilities people tried to hide away and not tell about it and not make public. And I think what is good today is we're coming out front and not having people be kept in the background. And I know people that have, autism or ADHD or cerebral palsy that are now in the schools, and they're doing very well, and they're in regular classrooms and in special needs classrooms. And I think that's good now that we're addressing those issues that, unfortunately, I think in past history, we didn't do that. Kids were kept at home, and it was kind of out of sight, out of mind. So I think we've made a lot of progress recently, in recent history, which I think is a good thing. And the only thing I think, my own knowledge, I've seen would be in the schools when I taught. I think that would be probably the biggest thing I can think of that we've made a lot of progress at.
Was Medfield State Hospital different from the Rentham State School or Fernald School in the type of people who lived there? Why was it closed?
Well, I don't have a lot. I mean, my knowledge would be strong with Medfield State Hospital, but I know the Fernald School, which I think was one of the first schools started by Samuel Howe way back. That Samuel Howe is an amazing guy. He also started the Perkins School for the Blind. Of course, he married Julia Ward Howe, that was the famous Battle Hymn of the Republic. I think the Fernald and then the Rentham School were mainly with younger kids, right, and students that were there. So that would be different because Medfield State Hospital was mainly older adults. But interesting, there was a time when they brought children in, some as young as age 4, into Medfield. But I think both the Fernald and Rentham were predominantly with kids. And I know with the Rentham School, another similarity, Rentham had the farm, as did Medfield, and a lot of the kids worked on the farm, and a lot of the residents at Medfield State Hospital also worked at the farm. And the farm in Medfield was huge. I mean, it had a dairy cows of more than 1,000, which was one of the largest in the state. It had a huge barn up there. They had silos filled with the corn that they grew. They had all kinds of vegetables that were grown up there that the residents worked on. And a lot of the produce that was grown in Medfield not only fed the residents there, but the residents in other hospitals in the area. I'm not sure if well, Rentham grew their own, so probably didn't go to Rentham State School. But so I think the main difference was most of Medfield's history was with adults, and I think a lot of the Fernald School and the Rentham School were younger kids that were there.
I've heard about the Medfield State Hospital. From what I've heard weird things about that place. From TV shows like that they have done on it.
What do you mean by weird things?
Well, I've heard that on the Travel Channel, they says rated as one of the most haunted places in the state of New England.
Well, I don't know if I necessarily believe all that, but there are people that feel they can go to a place and they can feel something. And I think, one of the reasons when the Medfield State Hospital closed back in April of 2003, and there was talk of what's going to go up there. There were some people that wanted to put a golf course up there. And some people said, wait a minute, aren't we being really disrespectful to the people? There was a lot of people, thousands of people. At many years, there was more people living up at Medfield State Hospital than there were in Medfield in total. And you had people that, lived and died up there, and many of them had no family. And originally, in our Vine Lake Cemetery, right here, up until the great influenza epidemic took place, they were buried in Medfield's Vine Lake Cemetery. And then, after that, the town said to the state, you need to build your own cemetery. And that's now the State Hospital Cemetery that's located right off of Route 27 by the Charles River. So here in Medfield, Vine Lake Cemetery, there are over 500 residents buried and over 800 buried that had no family, but they lived and died in their people. And sometimes it was like out of sight, out of mind, and we just kind of forgot about them. So a lot of people said, no, that would not be appropriate to have a golf course where these people lived. I think the plans that are now being developed of what to do up at Medfield State Hospital with Trinity, which is the group that's up there, they're going to keep all the buildings. They're going to preserve and add on to the buildings. And I think originally, when I was a selectman, one of the things we pushed for was to get the town to buy that land from the state, so the town would be in control of what's going to go up there, because the state was going to demolish all those buildings and put in 4- and 5-story GM apartments up there. You've been up there, you know what you walk through that, those backwoods, and you walk along the Charles River. I mean, it's like you're up in Vermont or New Hampshire. It's just beautiful area, open space that's up there. So I think what's going on now is probably a win-win situation. It's going to put some housing up there, it's going to preserve the buildings, it's going to keep a lot of the open space, and this Trinity is helping Belforge with the chapel to develop the cultural center that's going to be up there. So, you know, I think it's a win-win that's up there.
It says, I saw a picture of you with your family wearing a Bruins jersey. Is hockey your favorite sport?
Well, it is. I probably, maybe watching the Patriots first, but then the Bruins. Hockey in my family, my father was always a skater. He started at Medfield when they moved here, a Medfield Town team. And then he used to actually go down and play in the Cape Cod League down in Hyannis. And then in 1964, there was no hockey here in Medfield. I mean, growing up, you'd skate on the ponds. And in 1964, he started the first high school and junior high school hockey teams. And from that 1964, eventually, with a lot of other people got involved, you have the Medfield Youth Hockey Program. And now hockey in Medfield High School, both boys and girls, now you have both teams now, do tremendous. They do very well. And the Medfield Youth Hockey Program is very strong. But when we first started, I got to tell you, people never had the equipment and stuff. So when we first started, that first game we played, there was a kid on our team that had figure skates. He didn't even have hockey skates. And another kid, one of the kids was a goalie and didn't have the equipment like we have today. His mother made him a chest protector made out of Life magazines she wove together. So it was very basic. And we used to skate over the Four Seasons in Walpole, which is now Walmart. Have you ever been in Walmart? That used to be the Four Seasons Ice Arena. And so that's where you skated. And in high school, we used to skate, we got ice on Sunday mornings from 5 to 6 in the morning. But because there was no one on before us, they gave us the hour free. So we used to skate from 4 in the morning to 6 in the morning, which meant you had to get up around 3 in the morning to pack and get over there.
Talking about hockey, I used to play.
What was your position?
I was a right winger for a special needs adult team called the East Coast Jumbos.
Okay, I was a goalie.
I was a goalie. Forward. I used to have to get up at like 5 or 5:30 in the morning to get ready to go to practice.
Oh, sure.
And to get over to Rivers Rink in Weston for practice from 6 to 6:40 in the morning. I was so tired by the time I got home. I was like, ugh.
Yeah, well, as a high school kid, to get up at 3 in the morning after being out Saturday night, it was very tiring as well. But
I played for seven and a half years.
Well, I played through high school, and then I played in a number of leagues after that. But you know what really got hockey going in this area was Bobby Orr. With Bobby Orr, with the Bruins, hockey exploded in this area. They were building hockey rinks everywhere. Youth hockey programs started. I mean, he was the driving force behind hockey here in New England.
I met Bobby Orr when I was 10.
Did you really? First class.
He's a very good guy, and I'm glad that I had a chance to meet him.
I'll tell you a real quick story. My father, of course, idolized Bobby Orr as well. And he used to go over the Dover drugstore in Dover Center, and he would get his lunch there. And my father always would get coffee and a fried egg sandwich, right?
Oh, that sub shop, the one that I saw is boarded up.
No,
in Dover Center?
No, well, in Dover, this is right in Dover Center. It used to be the old Dover Drug, they called it. And it had the stools, and you could get something to eat for lunch. So my father is sitting there eating lunch. Bobby Orr used to live in Dover. And he came in, who sits down next to my father but Bobby Orr? And my father's like, whoa. And he said, what does Bobby Orr order? A coffee and a fried egg sandwich. Well, that made my father's day. He was all excited.
Well, there's a old sandwich place that's now boarded up in Dover Center.
Okay, I don't know where that is.
It's next to the fire station.
But the old Dover Drug was right around the corner, on the other side of the mobile that was there.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
Oh, I didn't know there was a fire there. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's been boarded up ever since.
Oh, that's terrible. That was a very popular place.
Yeah.
But anyhow, he and my father were able to talk hockey, and my father was very excited.
That was pretty cool that he got to meet Bobby.
Yeah.
So did I. You have also served in several elected roles in Medfield. What inspired you to seek those positions?
Well, the first, when I went to UMass Amherst, when I got out of college, I came home, and I ran for the Park and Recreation Commission. And part of it was working with a lot of students. I substituted for about a year and a half before I got the job here in Medfield. And I would talk to a lot of kids, especially here in Medfield, and there was a feeling that there's not a lot to do in Medfield. And how do we go about getting things? So one of the reasons I ran for Park and Recreation was to try to have more youth activities. I was only 22, I think, at the time, so I was fairly young. And so I got elected, and one of the first things we were able to get was what I called a youth advisory commission established. And what that was, it was appointed by the then called the selectmen. It was appointed by the selectmen, and there would be a member of the selectmen, there would be a member of the school committee, there was a member of the clergy, the police department, and then there were student representatives. So they could now meet, because students a lot of times felt, well, how do we go about getting things? So now by meeting, they could bring up their ideas, and the selectmen say, well, you need to do this or that, and the school person could say, well, we could do this, or the Park and Rec person was there. So we were able to get a number of things set up. We had a mini recreation center established, what we called the youth center, now called the FATH Center. And we opened that up on weekend nights. We had Chip Lennon with A&D, then A&D TV, brought in one of the big screen TVs, and we showed movies there. We had different entertainments and stuff, music that went on there. And we ran different events. We had road rallies and stuff that the kids wanted. They wanted a concert. We actually had this James Montgomery band, which was a big name band at the time, using the fields opposite the state hospital with the ball fields, softball fields, and we had a huge concert. There was more than 2,000-3,000 people ended up going. So we were able to get a number of different activities. So I think that's why I ran for Park and Recreation, to get some youth activities. And then I first ran for the Board of Selectmen, I think because I wanted to make it more transparent, get more so the people in town knew what was going on. And one of the reasons I ran was to set up what I called a mini town hall. And what that was is each month, a person somewhere in a different neighborhood, like in Pine Needle Park, for example, you'd open your home up. And as a selectman, I would go and you would invite, all the people that lived around you into your home. And I would sit with them and they would ask different questions. Because a lot of times people, not afraid, but people are hesitant. They don't want to go to a selectman meeting. They don't want to stand up, in front of all the people and ask questions. But if you put them in your living room, sit down, with a cup of coffee in their hand, they're able to talk and say, wait a minute, our sidewalks are terrible here, or why is this happening? And it also gave the selectmen a chance to say, here's what's going on in Medfield. Here's what we're going to do. It helped get them knowledgeable about the town. So when I got elected selectman, the other two selectmen at the time agreed to that. And once a month, we had one of these mini town halls in different neighborhoods all over the town. So that was one of the reasons that I ran. And the second time that I ran and was elected, I used to walk. I hike a lot and walk a lot. And so what I would do every day, I would pick out a different neighborhood. Like one day I would walk all through Pine Needle Park. And as I would see a cracked sidewalk or something, I would jot that down and bring it up at the next selectmen's meeting. So I tried to, as much as possible, make communications so that people felt tied to the town and they weren't alienated and more remote from the town. That you got to remember, it's the people that run things, not. You got to remember, people that are elected are public servants, which means they are servants of the public. And our job as elected officials is to do and try to help what the people want. That's what a democracy tries to do. So and maybe that's part of my being a political science teacher and a history teacher, wanting to make sure that happens. So that's part of what motivated me to run for selectmen, and the people of Medfield were very generous in electing me each time to do that.
What do you think are the biggest challenges facing Medfield in 2024?
Wow. Well, I think right off the bat, the biggest challenge is what's going to happen with the former Medfield State Hospital. They're in working with Trinity. There's some state and money issues they have to work on that hopefully will come through. Also with Belforge, also to make sure they're going to be successful up there. So I think right off the bat, that's the biggest issue Medfield has to deal with. We also have in Medfield the whole issue of elementary education. As you know, there was a big debate here in town whether to refurbish, add on to Dale Street, or build a whole new school. That was defeated, building the new school, but the issue is still there. So I think that's a big issue here in Medfield of what's going to happen to the Dale Street School and what's going to happen to elementary education, because education in Medfield is extremely important. I think my own tie is outside of the historical look and feeling of Medfield. Clearly, education is the number one reason a lot of people move to Medfield. It's a very good school system. So I think they have to maintain that excellent reputation and excellent education. So that's also a big priority. So I think those are the two things right off the bat. And then my own personal thing, I get upset sometimes when I see a lot of Medfield's history being demolished, a lot of historic homes, where developers are coming in and they're more interested in knocking it down because they can make more money and put more houses. And when you keep destroying the history and the heritage and the fabric of Medfield, you're losing something you're not going to be able to get back.
Yeah.
I think Medfield passed a demolition delay bylaw that at least temporarily protects a lot of the homes, historic homes in Medfield. But we're seeing a lot of the town's history being destroyed. So I think that's another area that in 2024, Medfield really has to take a strong look at. So I think those would probably be the three right off the top of my head I would think of.
We wish to thank Richard for appearing today on Special Times with Peter Filosa. Stay tuned for our future episodes. Goodbye.
Peter, thank you for the invitation. Thank you.